Here's a stewardship story for you. Because our denomination, the United Church of Christ, budgets for education events for young people. In 1992, I got to attend a national youth event. It was at Beloit, Wisconsin. And at that event, for the first time, I thought about saying out loud that I wanted to be a pastor. It was an actual thought in my head. That could be a possibility. There are lots of things in my memory from that week. One is the theme song for the week, shout it from the mountaintop, we've got stories to tell. That one haunted me throughout my discernment process. But the other memory in my head from that week is the group of kids that I hung out with. And in my head, standing next to this girl named Pegeen, there's this dark-haired boy from Southern Illinois. And he's always wearing a purple t-shirt in my memory. You know who that dark-haired boy was in 1992 at National Youth Event? It was David Gerstenecker. That's how stewardship works. That we give to the church, both to this local church and to the wider church, and because of that, people are able to live out their call, whether that's to ordained ministry or to lay ministry, because we are all ministers of the gospel. We're all ministers of the gospel. We're all blessed by God. And because we're blessed, we should be grateful for the love of God that is without condition in our lives. And when those two things come together, then eventually, hopefully, we become willing to live out that call. You're going to hear some of those stories, not from me this morning, but from your stewardship chair, David Gerstenecker, who has been part of this congregation for 22 or 23 years. So as we prepare for the word preached, let us join our hearts and minds in prayer. O God, may the words of our mouths and the meditations of each of our hearts be found acceptable in your sight, for you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So David, I begin with this question in terms of blessing. How is it that Community United Church of Christ has shined like a star of blessing for you?
It started simply that this church exists and is the United Church of Christ Church. I grew up in the UCC church and was very involved in local and regional and national youth event during high school. People told me that there was a campus ministry of the UCC here at the University of Illinois when they heard that I was going, and I knew I wanted to continue my life in the UCC. So after a few days of getting settled in dorm life, I looked up where the campus ministry was, I think out of the phone book. Yep. I walked over from Florida Avenue Residence Halls, walked into this church and plopped down in the chair in Karen's office.
So when you think of how our church shines like a star in terms of blessing, remember location. Friends, we could sell our building tomorrow for a lot of money and move off of campus. But we're a blessing to students because of our location. And because of that location, we're able to host the campus ministry for the United Church of Christ. So David, tell us about your experience as a campus ministry student. How did that bless you?
Campus ministry was a circle of friends and a circle of support for me. I was on the student executive team for a bit and worked to make the campus ministry a great place for other students. And I love it when Karen introduces me. And how do you introduce me, Karen?
David is the one who urged us to always remember to pray together.
That's right. This is your brother in the campus ministry. David is the reason we pray more. This was a place for me both to have fun with a great group of friends and also a place to have those theological discussions and conversations about God and prayer and social justice. And this building itself, this sanctuary was a blessing for me. I've always been comfortable with the size of the university. I wanted to go here for many years before coming here as a student. But sometimes I needed a quiet place to connect with God. One of the beauties of being on the student executive team was having an outside key. And so sometimes I'd come into this building, come into this sanctuary at 10 or 11 p.m. at night, and walk in with the moonlight streaming in and talk with God about the things that were going on in my life. Having this peaceful place was quiet was a blessing during my college career.
And do you know that having this place as a peaceful and quiet place is still a blessing for students today? Just last week, a student wandered into the office and said to me, "I have looked all over campus for a quiet place to be, and I can't find it. Not even the library is quiet," he said. And so we talked more, and I said to him, "Anytime the building's open, please feel free to come in and sit in the sanctuary so that you can have that quiet, still space that you need."
Another time this church shined like a star for me is when I was feeling very sad and dark after an engagement with a college sweetheart was broken off. I was driving around and was pulled towards this church. It was late and I didn't expect anybody to be around. But lo and behold, the lights were on, and I stopped and I came in and found comfort. The people of this church were here and provided me comfort when I desperately needed it. And when I say dark, it was a place of depression, and being able to find that comfort, find that family here, when the closest family I had otherwise was 2 hours away, was very comforting to me. It was amazing to have that love so close. That connection with the campus ministry that night and this church that night and the love of this church helped me through that very difficult time.
I've heard Karen say it so often to students, and I say it as well, that our church becomes family for people in a way that perhaps other church experiences do not. So many of us are not from here, and so whenever life goes haywire, we're all we have. And so what a blessing to be able to be family for one another. So David, is it only campus ministry that has blessed you?
No.
Tell us more about that.
Yeah, mission trips are also came to mind when thinking about the blessings of this church. I've been touched by many experiences and the opportunities to work side by side with the people of this church, the people that are in the organizations that we're working with, and the people who were there to serve. In one instance, we went to West Virginia to work with the Appalachian Service Project. And this was a time there were multiple groups besides this church that were there, and it was an opportunity to work with alongside different faith perspectives and, of course, different personalities. You know, I've grown in those opportunities to eat breakfast with these folks and to have evening devotionals to discuss the ways God was working with us during the trip. On one particular trip there in West Virginia, I felt a special blessing when we were in a house working. We were fixing up a bathroom and working to paint the house. Jessica Smiley, Louis Berganzi, Mary Anderson, Ashley Barnes, and I were there working on this house together. And as was a tradition, we had packed our lunches in the morning and taken them, and we were going to eat when our stomachs told us it was time. And so we were about to eat, and we were finding a place outside because we were all dirty and from working and painting. And the owner of the house invited us inside. No, come inside, join me inside. Of course, we tried to say no. We're covered in dirt and paint, and she insisted, and so we accepted and crowded into her little kitchen. And not only that, she offered us food, even though we had brought our own. And this connected me back to the value that we have of our extravagant welcome, our extravagant hospitality. I needed to accept her extravagant hospitality in that time. And I realized that was part of these mission trips. Sitting down and having a meal with her, a woman we were there to serve, talking with her about our lives and her life and the impact of our stories. That is what a mission trip truly is about. It is about connecting with the people and understanding their stories. That does not come from being on a ladder all day, but rather from sitting down and breaking bread together, or in this case, Pringles.
So tell us a story of what you are grateful for in terms of this community of faith.
Yeah. Oh my, so many things. When I came to this church, Reverend Jack Good was our pastor, and I'm so grateful for the times to have conversations with him. So grateful for the opportunities to sit down and talk with you, Leah. I'm so grateful for the way that we conduct business. I've sat in my fair share of church council and church life board meetings and annual meetings. Some of those meetings have had some high intensity to them. Emotions that bubble to the surface because people really care about this church. While we've had some of those times and those differing opinions, I'm grateful that each time there's a sense that we are family together, that we love each other, and that we come to decisions that reflect what is best for us and reflect what is best for this community for which we are a part of. I'm also grateful for the more direct ways that we care for each other, our prayer calendars and our meal trains. I'm grateful for the prayers that people have prayed for me and my family, and I love being able to pray for you and the people of this church. I'm grateful for the support that I have felt through my life and grateful for the support that I've been able to give.
Now, when David and I were planning this message for you this week, what happened next in our conversation was very interesting, so I want you to pay attention. Because what David talked about next was not about what he was grateful for in terms of what he had received from the community. But what he spent time talking about next was what he was grateful for in terms of the way he's been able to be of service to the community. That struck me as one of the most faithful things that I had ever heard in my life. Because at some point, God changes our hearts. We aren't only grateful for the things that we have received, but also the ways in which we have been able to give. David, tell us about that.
Sure. So this was the time that recently stood out for me was when I was grateful to be able to serve as an usher for Becky Duffield's funeral and celebration of life in April. It was such hard news to hear that she had gone on hospice, and then again, such difficult news when she had died. I remember Carl and Travis being little kids, and Becky and Brian always being gracious and welcoming me and other college students back when I was young. She was a powerhouse of willingness. She shared her passion and her energy with this church. I'm grateful to have served with her on a mission committee together. I remember when the email came out asking for ushers and greeters to help navigate this kind of crazy church building that we have. It was scheduled on a Thursday, and that Thursday on my calendar looked very busy. But I had a strong call to come and help. So over those next 3 days, I worked it out so my calendar was cleared, and I put myself forward to be able to come and serve. I was so grateful to be able to help Brian, Carl, and Travis so that they could have that day be as good of a day as that kind of day can be.
You know, there are certain things that only pastors think about at 4 a.m. The Duffields wanted to have a funeral and a meal that all happened downstairs. And so I laid awake several nights between them telling me that information and the day itself, trying to figure out how we would route people through the building, up and down stairs and in and out without creating bottlenecks and traffic jams. And I remember standing at the bottom of that stairwell with David Gerstenecker, explaining how he would route people down the stairs and then cut the line and route people through a Sunday school room so that we wouldn't have people waiting on the stairs, because that would be dangerous. it's only because you all show up and take care of the million little things that have to be taken care of for a regular worship service or a wedding or a funeral or Jubilee Cafe or a campus ministry event or whatever it is that we have to be doing, that enables myself and Connie to be able to do the work that we have to do as pastors during that time. I am grateful for that, for the way in which we do ministry together.
We did have, that day we had a great group of people that were, Jan and others, helping navigate that winding snake of people down and through and to greet the family.
So David, would you tell us about a specific time that you were grateful to receive the gifts of service from this community?
Well, I'm very grateful for the gifts of service I've received. I find it very hard to talk about. This was definitely part of the sermon that I had put off quite a bit because it's harder for me to talk about. But doing things that are hard in life make us grow stronger. And even though this is hard, I'm going to talk about a time that was hard, and that this church was a big part of getting me through that. So back when Sophie and I were married, we decided to be foster parents for a set of sisters. That was a brand new experience for us. And it was a stressful experience, more so than I was expecting. Our church family, you all responded with babysitting and meals during this time. I remember Susan Schnur taking the girls one day so that the girls could have a fun day and Sophie and I could have some time to think and talk. I was so grateful for those instances and all of the support we received. This church family definitely embodied the village in the phrase, "It takes a village to raise a child." Our foster children were met with love and support each time they walked into this church, and we were met with gifts of people wanting to help us in this endeavor. We might have been the ones that became foster parents during that time, but it was this church family that clearly signed up to help be a foster family with us. I continue to be grateful for the love that was shown to us as we were serving during that time.
It's one of the ways that we live out our baptismal vows to each other, the congregational assent. When you all say to the one being baptized that we cannot promise you a world without pain and suffering, but we can promise you that we will be with you and walk with you through your life. We do that with each other as a community of faith in service, both giving and receiving the gifts of the community.
You know, I'm also struck as I think about people that are willing, as Vicki Robertson's willingness when she was here at the church. She was so involved in the life of this church and always willing to take care of hard things and hard decisions of this church. She put in a lot of time and sweat, and I really feel Vicki's the reason that we don't have a room or multiple rooms full of unwanted furniture and items downstairs. That is because she used her gift of no clutter to make sure we didn't have old ring-stained coffee tables that people thought a church could use. But she's just one example. It is amazing to see people respond to the needs in this church. And so currently I'm so struck by the group of folks that are making Jubilee Cafe happen in our church. It is such a tremendous blessing, a tremendous story of sharing a tremendous story of answering God's call to do God's work in our community. It is taking care of our community, our neighbors. That story includes the fact that we have a kitchen available to make the delicious food that is served at Jubilee Cafe. I remember years ago, it was a serious conversation to spend that kind of money in order to renovate the kitchen and to perform some other maintenance on the church. This church had been proud not to have a mortgage for many years. And as I mentioned earlier about the times and church meetings, I'm grateful that we had those tough conversations and we were able to move forward with the decision that we thought was best. We willingly chose to give additional money to this church in order for this mortgage to happen, in order for the kitchen to happen. Not because, we needed a mortgage and that's, the money to make that happen, but we willingly give to this church because we have a beautiful kitchen that allows us to do the mission of Jubilee Cafe. And we know that it takes money to pay off that mortgage that allows us to serve the people in our community that delicious food that is served. You know, Leah, I was curious, so I looked it up. I became a pledger in 2001. I was willing to commit to the great work happening in this church. Our willingness to give financially impacts each of us, both inside and outside of these walls. By committing of our money, by making a pledge to this church, our church life board is able to make a balanced budget to be good stewards, and that budget in turn feeds the people that are willing to take their time and their sweat and make these programs happen. And those programs in turn impact the people outside of these walls. It starts with each of us being willing to pledge to commit our portion of money to God's mission for our church. Being blessed is God asking us to do God's work. We have so many blessings here at Community United Church of Christ. I'm so grateful for those blessings and the ways in which we serve each other and our neighbors. I'm also so grateful for the willingness on our parts to answer God's call to create this space that serves us and so many people. The patrons at Jubilee Cafe, the students on Quad Day, the students of campus ministry, each others in the pews, and our neighbors outside these church walls.
If there is any encouragement in Christ, any consolation from love, any sharing in the Spirit, any compassion and sympathy, make my joy complete. Be of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. Do all things without murmuring and arguing, so that you may be blameless and innocent children of God, without blemish, in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, in which you, because you've shared of your any, and together it's become more than we could imagine. Because of that, you shine like stars. Amen.
Amen.